All right, for those of you who were in the session before where I talked about the conceptual shifts you have to go through to be able to work with people with employment barriers, remember we were talking about people who the employment barrier is a physical characteristic that makes the candidate appear atypical, that's visible, makes the candidate appear atypical to the employer, as an atypical candidate that they would be hiring. I'm just saying that again for those who haven't been here before. For those of you who were in the last session, I had one question for technique. I'll entertain other questions because this one I can tell you how to do it. Any other questions on technique you want to know about engaging the employer? Does anybody have any technique questions? I have a bunch of technique I'll show you, but I'll move it according to your questions if you give me some other questions.
Not so much the employer, but how do you convince your funders that this model is better?
Oh, where's Jamie? We're going to get Rosani. That's our biggest problem, is because I have to tell you, the inertia in our system to use the old job readiness model is so enormous. It's very, very difficult. And it was only because in Goodwill North Georgia, am I saying it correct? It was only because of Cheryl, the VP in charge of operations, it was only because she saw with Chip Kenny, I don't know if you know Chip Kenny from Georgia State, he was from Florida. It was only because those two actually understood this model, and he had used it with Florida Blind. He'd changed his entire system, that we got the momentum. So at this point, all I'm trying to do with these two sessions is to create some momentum in this state through Rosani's boss, Jamie, to try and get workforce organizations to consider this idea. Because Rosani is fully trained in this material, so she knows this material, not as well as I do, but she knows it almost as well as I do. And so she can lead some of the discussions and directions. But it is a big change. And it's very hard if you're committed to the job readiness model to entertain this model except as an auxiliary model, which is not a bad place to start. So no, I don't have an answer for how you get your organizations to change, because we've tried many different ways, and it's really been leadership driven. That's the only place it has never been line staff driven. Line staff can take on the new techniques and do it, and often because the ideas are counterintuitive, they will get poo-pooed by their bosses. Any other technique questions you might want me to answer for you?
I have a question. I have an employer that he is looking, I guess they have like an OJT or something that they're trying to fill positions for, but the employer keeps like bouncing back the participants because it's like a big machines kind of thing in warehouses, and they keep telling us they need like engineer type minds. And we're like, well, do they really need to be engineers, or do they really need certain skill set? I guess my question is, like, how do you deal with an employer that really does have what they consider to be a high-tech kind of position? Right. How do you break them down to get to the simplest solution?
Okay, so let me just give you two answers to that. The question was, to repeat it for the camera, was how do you get employers to change their mind on who they're hiring after they've hired from you, and you don't give them the right candidate because they think the candidate is not as qualified as they've said that they want. All right, so the answer to that basically is don't give them a candidate until you've changed their mind. It's very difficult if you've gone out and taken the order, you've taken the job order and they've told you what they wanted, and then you give somebody that you think can fill that job order and they think they can't, but they give them a chance, generally because they're doing you some kind of favor, small favor, but doing you a favor, and then that doesn't work out. All it does is reinforce for them that your candidates are not the candidates that they want. That's why we never send in candidates till we are controlling the job. We actually understand.
How do you then break down that skill set for that job description?
Okay, so you want to know the questions. Okay, what are the questions? I can give you a few. And I actually have that in here. What's the first question you ask after you meet the employer? Which is, what's your birth date? No? What are the questions? And I have to tell you, there's lots of people who are better wordsmiths than I. And once you understand the structure of asking the questions, the kind of questions that we're asking, You can find often people in your own organizations that can wordsmith the questions better. It's what we talked last time about this notion of systems thinking, and it's dynamic, and we're continuing to evolve it. One of the things we would always be doing is sitting the staff down and saying what questions worked, what questions didn't work, and then we would start to change those questions. So we would take that experience and say, hey, that was a bit of a bummer, didn't really do very much. What did we do inside of that wasn't working well? And then potentially, if we have a big enough market, are you in an urban setting or rural setting? Urban. So you have a big market. Potentially, this is another strategy I would always use. I'd say forget them for a year. We'll go back to them in a year from now. Just drop it. Why? Because it's too much work. I don't need. The only people who tend to have to work that hard is people who have a small market. That's the only employer they got. So I've got to get that person to hire somebody, otherwise I'm screwed. Right? So we say, no, we would not solve it like that. We would solve it from prospecting, which is get a whole bunch more employers, learn from that one, move on to the other ones, come back to that one a year from now. They may not even remember you. If they do, they'll be in a completely different frame of mind, start again with a better technique. This is why the idea in technique is to have as big a market share as possible. It's to be working on market share. Rule of thumb. Do you know what I mean when I say job developer? Okay, per job developer, after 18 months, rule of thumb, must have at least 25 different employers that they can phone and say, hi, it's Alan Anderson from Workforce, and I have some candidates I want to talk about, and they will take my call. At least 25. The max we can put in there for one job developer is about 50 to 75. But if they have 4, 5, 6, I worked with a group in Oregon, Rose something, in Oregon, just south of Salem. The person had been working there for 20 years. I said, count the number of employers you've got that you can actually make this call. It was 7. What placements can they make? Nothing. It's too small. As soon as there's a recession or a downturn, right, the number gets even smaller. All right, again, before I move on, what are the questions? Anything else on technique? All right, let's start then. All right, so this is about the how-tos, skills to engage an employer to get them to consider hiring an atypical candidate. Remember, we always say consider. We don't say hire, because the actual hire takes place in the cell, and I'll show you how to do a cell, but it's not necessarily always going to work. But here's what happens with our cells. If our cell fails, if it doesn't actually work, the employer loses, not us. All right? Because we know our candidate would have worked out for that employer. So if an employer says no to us, it's because of something the employer has misunderstood, something that we've said has nothing to do with our candidate. Which means we never blame or label our candidates. Every candidate I put forward to an employer is a candidate that will work out. I've already measured all that. And that makes it way easier for you because your confidence is not challenged. Because if you go and send somebody out because you like their resume or you think the employer is going to work out and just send them out and that candidate fails in the interview for whatever reason, you then will internalize that and become afraid of your candidates. And once you're afraid of your candidates, who else is afraid of your candidates? All the employers, because they'll hear it in your voice. They'll hear what you're doing. And you'll end up in a different type of relationship than you want to be in. You'll be in begging or go back to the old model, which is unfortunately still common. When I first joined this business, this was the job development model, beg and pray. Have you seen it? Please, please hire somebody. Geez, I pray nothing's going to go wrong here. So unfortunately, it still works, or still used, doesn't work, but still used, and that's what will happen to you once you lose confidence in your candidates. You will go back into beg and pray. If an employer's initial reaction to your candidate is no, what do you do to turn it into a maybe or a yes? And our solution is selling the employer one job and one candidate at a time with a customized direct selling strategy. That's what we're doing. I take each job individually, each candidate individually, and I customize my engagement to that particular employer, although I use an overarching strategy of how I customize. We have adapted many business selling techniques to fit a human service milieu, as direct business applications did not work for us. As I was saying at break, when I first started in this business, I couldn't figure out. When I became the director of job development in an organization in Toronto, we were the largest placement organization for people with developmental disabilities in North America. So we had 2,000 clients in service, and we were supposed to place about 100 people a year. When I became director, I had been a job developer in that organization prior, and our best skill as a job developer was lying to the director, because nobody knew what they were doing. A couple with naturals. We had a couple naturals, right? They were kind of good, but the rest of us just lied. And when I became director, I knew all the lies. And I said to my staff, well, you know, choices, we can keep lying, we'll just lie above, or we can figure it out. And that's when we figured it out. And we tried, the first figuring out was to apply business techniques, business sales techniques to human services, and they didn't work. But adapted, they worked. And that's what I'm going to show you, is the adaptations that we put in place. All right, we started from the premise that the employer would view us with skepticism. This is really important. We're walking in expecting a no. We're not walking in expecting a yes. How does that change what you're selling? It changes everything, because if you believe that you're going to go in and sell on the benefits of your product, that somehow your product will sparkle and the other person will see that sparkle and buy it, then you're going to be solely disappointed when they don't see the sparkle, right? And our employers did not see the sparkle. So we had to build the sparkle. We had to make that candidate seem like somebody that the employer wanted to hire. And we actually had to manufacture it rather than letting the product manufacture it. And that was the classic switch in how we made our sales approach. Again, these are my credentials for those who don't know me. I've been in the field for 35 years. Lots of states are using our stuff. I don't want to spend a lot of time on hundreds of thousands of people with berries have gone out to work. We literally have hundreds of thousands. We have one organization that places 200,000 a year of people with berries, all disadvantaged youth. So we have hundreds of thousands. We also work with homeless, which place one person a year, because the person is so significantly disabled, there's so much to do with them, and they don't have enough resources that they're only producing 1, 2, 3 people a year. So we go right down to one person a year, up to hundreds of thousands a year with this particular methodology. And we build it all on significant repeat business. Now, if you get repeat business as a person who teaches job development, what must be happening for you? The people who use your techniques are getting results. Otherwise, you don't get repeat businesses or business. So all of our stuff, we have tons and tons of people who use our stuff on an ongoing basis, and we have repeat business. We also base our relationship with employers on repeat business, which means we want that employer doing business with us for the rest of their employment existence. All right, benefits. I want to harp on them here. No new skills to use to build what you already do. We're building on things you already know. We're going to switch them around a little. Increase quality and quantity of jobs. You will get better jobs. Now, you can't get rid of all the entry-level jobs that are starting points for lots of people. But those jobs are really for students living at home. They're really for people who are using it as, you know, a retirement job. They're not anything else for us besides a stepping stone to your career, to your advancement. We're not locked into the low-end jobs. We're looking for much higher quality, and we're looking for much higher quantity of jobs. With your employment now at 4%, your unemployment now at 4%, this is a magical time for you as a country. This is a magical time for this population. In North Carolina, in the recession of, not the 2008 recession, it was a recession before that, the entire furniture industry went down. We had been building with North Carolina Blind, prior to that recession, the notion of building relationships with employers is the fundamental focus of how they got people who were blind jobs. When that recession was hit, they did not lose any, their numbers did not go down at all. Whereas where everybody else was losing jobs. Why? Because they had created strong, lasting relationships with their employers. And when everybody else was looking for their jobs, the employer did not want to go through the hassle of going through 50, 100, 600 resumes to find somebody. They went back to their trusted source and said, just give me somebody. They didn't advertise their jobs, and they didn't go and look for other places. That's what you have right now. This is the opportunity with low unemployment, is to make those relationships with employers strong now, so when the next recession will hit, and there will be another one, you will have an existence that will be sustained by the fact of those relationships. That's why this is a golden time for you. So in expanded capacity to serve your community, enhanced capacity to serve all who seek your assistance. This has always been my mantra, is to turn nobody away. We will serve them all. I don't know if it's a mantra of your workforce, but I got the sense from what Jamie was saying at lunch that you hope that it might become the mantra of your workforce. Is to serve everybody, to have the capacity to serve everybody. I said this earlier, and I'll say it again. If you can do two things, you will have people coming to you for collaboration. And that is, if you can find people jobs, everybody who has candidates, all the schools, all the other agencies, will come to you to help them find jobs for their students, for their people. And if you can supply employers with candidates that they now believe are coming from a trusted source that they like, it's not going to be flawless, then they will join you too. So one of the best ways to make the collaboration with your community work is to produce a product where you can supply the employers with things that the employer says, yeah, that's a good place to go, and then supply your colleague organizations with that's a good place to go because they get jobs. Jobs is the key to almost everything in our society. If you've got a job, you have a chance. If you don't have a job, you're kind of lost. So fulfilling your mandate, the other benefit. All right, so here's what I want you to do. Consider these skills as they apply to your circumstances and how they might work. And then try the skills, because some of them I'll show and you can actually go and do them. Try the skills and just see how they work for you. If you want more expertise on these skills, because you won't have access to me, is Rosani Rios there, who is with Workforce, with Jamie's team. And she has really, really got these skills well developed, and she's a resource for the state of Georgia on these skills. If we do more things on these skills, maybe we do. Maybe she brings me back, but at this point, that's not happening because I have to take care of my cows in Brazil, and they're very needy. So Rosani's going to be a point person for the skill development if you need it, and point person for the organizational development if you need it. All right, so we're going to first of all start out with what we call easy prospecting, and then we're going to go into a consultative selling strategy, managing expectations, and then creating a selling statement. Easy prospecting. Of all the things you need to understand in getting employment for people with employment barriers or without employment barriers, it's exactly the same, is you've got to be able to find the jobs. You've got to be able to either have them find them on their own or you find them. Now, if you have them find them on their own, that's perfectly fine. We have no issue with that at all. What are the ones we have an issue with? Yeah, they find them, but they never get them. Or they never even find them. So those are the groups we're worried about. So we're building strategies to help those groups. The ones who can find their own, they take your course, and off they go, and they're a success. You should keep doing exactly what you're doing right now. It's the other ones we're worried about, because they're the ones you're going to get now with booming unemployment. You're going to get all the harder to serve coming into your services, because the other ones got jobs on their own already. They didn't need to come and see you. So the ones you've got coming in are the ones who finally think there might be a chance out there for them. All right, so easy prospecting. You've got to find out where those jobs are. Let's just take a look what I wrote down here. So where do you find the right jobs? You need jobs that your candidate can do. All right, so you have candidates at various levels. You need jobs that they can do, and we have what's called the open and the hidden job market. Do you know the difference between these two? I know it's a very simple concept, but I want to make sure it's really clear because it's crucial to us in understanding prospecting. Do you know the difference between the open and the hidden job market? What's the open job market?
Publicly advertised.
Publicly advertised, absolutely. How many jobs are in the publicly advertised? It's higher now because of the low unemployment. How many jobs are in the publicly advertised market?
Thousands.
Percentage-wise. But you're right, thousands. Percentage-wise. 70, 35, anybody else? All right, it's 20% or less. And in rural, it's 0, right? All right, so 20% or less. Not many jobs. Right now there's more because the hidden job market's not working. Because there's so many jobs, nobody can make a referral through the hidden job market. All right, hidden job market is what? I'm sorry? It's not advertised. How do you get the jobs in the hidden job market? You have to have somebody tell you, right? It has to come to you in some way. So it's 80 plus, and in a recession, what is this number? It's 100. In a rural setting, it's 100. In highly competitive marketplaces, it's 100. They're not putting anything out there into the public. So here's the first task you have to do. If you are a manager or you are a job developer, you need to look at which market you're actually operating in right now and which market you are telling your candidates to operate in. Because lots of people will tell their candidates to operate in the hidden job market, but they don't have a strategy for them to open those jobs. It's just language. Okay, go into the hidden job market. Ask all your relatives if they know somebody who's hiring. All right, go down to your local grocery store and ask them if they're hiring. Well, it's not enough jobs. It's not deep enough. So you need to look. Where are we looking for our jobs? And if people are looking in ads, if they're looking in, what is that, Google thing? If they're looking on social networks, a little bit better. But they're mostly open job market jobs. What's the problem with an open market job for our people who have barriers? I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Competitive.
Yeah, it's too competitive, right? And what's the employer measuring against? All the other candidates. So the criteria for getting the job rises, right? Which is why in my books, if I was running your organizations, or if I was your boss, I wouldn't let you touch it. I'd say, forget it. If they come in, they come in. But I want this market, and I want control in this market. I want to be able to say, I've got this number of employers who are in this market, and when they hire, they come to who first? In the rural job market, we own many of the small communities. We own every single employer in that market because we concentrated on this market, not waiting to figure out who was going to put an ad in a window or who was going to put an ad in the newspaper to find out who was actually hiring. Now, I'll give you the reason why. It'll be a little bit different for you, maybe. It was a small community outside of Pendleton, Oregon. And there was a woman there who ran a pizza store. And I said to her, she was taking a course with me, and she said, you know, Alan, she says, in the rural job market, when you hire, you don't get pick of the litter. You know what that means? Where did the pick of the litter go? They went to Pendleton, right? They're not staying in this little town. I think the town was like 10,000 people. They've gone to what's the capital of Oregon? Portland. Or not the capital. Salima is the capital. They've gone to Portland, right? They've left. And you've got what you've got left. So when we hire from you, because you do follow-up, because you give us support, we don't have to worry about that. That's why we hire from you. So we went to every single employer in town and we offered support on their hiring if they hired through us. How many employers signed up? All of them. So we now own the entire market. So when the employer calls, we may not have a candidate for them because we don't have candidates for the entire market. But they will always keep calling. And we can always go back when we have a candidate available because we know the market. So we're trying to own the entire market in the rural, but we won't do that in the urban. So we're after the hidden job market, and we got to figure out a way to get in. And there's a very easy way if you can get directories. I have to tell you, I'm working with a group of refugees in Maryland. And the big problem I have is I cannot find a bloody directory for Maryland, an employer directory. So if you have any ideas, I'd be delighted to hear it. But here, you have BusinessWise, which is the directory we used with VR. So you have a directory here that you can purchase. I don't know if you can get it for free, but you can at least purchase it, called BusinessWise. And it lists every single employer in the state of Georgia. And we want that directory. So any directory that you have. Now, I'm going to give you another little piece of information I didn't put in here. The U.S. Census tracks all jobs in the United States. It just tracks them by number. It doesn't track them by name. By number and by category. I'll give it to Rosani, because I can't remember the exact link here. But it will tell you the sectors in your area, who's actually hiring and who's doing repeat business in their hiring, who's hiring replacements. And you will be really surprised when you see those numbers, because you will not be able to predict them, because there's just too many employers. And it will give you a good overview of who you should be prospecting with. Because if you see a big, large number in a particular sector, then you're going to prospect against that sector because you know that they're hiring. Now, these stats are a year out of date, sometimes only 6 months. Depends on how the state reports them. But they're excellent. It's the first time we've been able to actually get that data and say in the state of Georgia, in industrial waste, there was 15,000 jobs created. And what it does is it puts in perspective the number of jobs and employers you need. So how many people are you placing a year? You're not placing like hundreds of thousands of them. You're placing 1,000 of them. Well, then you only need, say, 1,500 employers. That means when you look at these numbers, there's way more than 1,500 employers here. So it gives you a much better perspective on how you can capture the market. All right, so stop predicting where candidates go to work and look everywhere, and then focus on generating repeat business. We want the employer hiring from us over and over and over and over again. The repeat business employer is golden. The new business employer is a lot of work. All right, so we're going to do easy prospecting. This is the simple system. I'm assuming you've got a directory, and we're going to use the thing called random lead generation. It was a system that I created, and I created it because my staff were having problems with cold calls. Do you know what a cold call is? How many of you do cold calls? They're a nightmare. I hate cold calls. So we did this one. Now, some people will argue with us that it actually is a cold call because we don't know the receptionist. But I said, it's not a cold call because the receptionist has to answer the phone. So the employer doesn't, but the receptionist does. So let me tell you about the one we set up for VR. VR actually hired, what's the name of the group, the blind, what's the name of the agency? Services for the Blind? I'm sorry?
Georgia Industries for the Blind.
Yeah, Georgia Industries for the Blind. VR hired with them on contract that they would train 6 people who were visually impaired or blind to make these calls. They're generating, at that time, I'm sure they're generating thousands more if they're even still using it. When leadership changes, they let things go. But at that time, generating 3,000 leads a month. Do you know what you can do with 3,000 leads a month? You now know 3,000 employers are actually hiring. 3,000 employers are actually hiring. And every month you know now 3,000 employers are hiring. It could be some of the same, but you now have 3,000 leads, which is way easier to deal with. So here's what we had them do. They got the directory and they got all the lists of names. And I did this randomly, although some organizations will do it based on the industry type. I did it randomly because I didn't want people predicting the jobs. I wanted any job to emerge because I wanted jobs we'd never thought of to come to the forefront. When I predicted the jobs, we got much less response, but I don't mind people saying, well, we'll do it in the transportation industry, or we'll do it in the trucking industry, or we'll do it in the healthcare industry. But I preferred it to do it just generically by random. All right? We called the receptionist. We did not call the HR manager. We did not call anybody in management at all, only the receptionist. And we asked them these 5 questions. And this is all we did. The first question was, do you have a job? Is there a job opening with your company? Now, we learned very quickly that our tone of voice was important. We had to sound cheery, and we could have candidates do this. We didn't have staff do it, right? So we had to have cheery candidates. When I first did this in New Mexico, I did it in Albuquerque when we first tried it out. We were only using the yellow pages. We didn't even have a complete list of employers. We were using the yellow pages, and we were using it for people who were on welfare, people who were receiving, what's it called, welfare? TANF, yeah. Sorry, it's been a couple of years since I've remembered all the names. So people on TANF, again, we had the same result. We were way over producing jobs than we had people available. So we asked, do you have a job? What's going to be the response? Yeah, it's going to be yes or no. Or go to corporate. But it's going to be yes or no, generally. So if they say no, what do we do? I'm sorry? We hang up. We just say thank you very much and hang up. Or there's some organizations that are doing this because it's useful. We say, could you give me the name of the hiring manager? All right? And it's just to collect names. So they can send emails, or they can send letters, or they can send something else. It's just not to pass that piece of information by. But normally I just say hang up. Right? But let's say they say yes. What's our next question? What's the job? Okay? And they'll say, oh, we're looking for a cashier. What's the next question? Who's in charge of hiring? Alan Anderson, our manager. All right? Do you know the rate of pay? Sometimes they won't. We don't know. It doesn't matter to us if they do or they don't. If we get it, it's a bonus. If we don't, we say thank you. But the last question is our most important question. And that is, has a job been advertised? And why is that an important question for us?
You know whether it's competitive or not.
We know whether it's in the open or the hidden job market. Now, I get this list back. What do you think my return on this list is? Of 100 calls, how many jobs do I find? Now, in this economy, tons. But in a regular economy, about 20%. So I would get 20 leads back a day per 100 calls. All right? If I was in this economy, I would get a lot more. But I'll also be getting a lot more that may have gone into the open market. All right, so I get back these 20 calls. What do I do with them? And how do I set it up? Normally we expect to make 100 to 200 calls on the first day of a week and then follow up for the rest of the week on those calls. So now the job developers are chasing what? Leads. They're not chasing cold calls. If I don't get any leads from those 100 calls, if I don't get any that reflect the candidate population I have to place, what do? Yeah, make another 100 calls. See, it's a very simple system, and what it allows you to do is to explore the market without getting out of your office and not to take any time with the employer when it doesn't seem appropriate that it's a good time to go to that employer. So every time I go to the employer and I have my 20 jobs, so here's my 20 jobs, which employers of these 20 do I go to? Which one do I call? Even if I'm going to send a candidate out, which ones do I call? Of these 20 that I found, of my 100, which ones do I call? I'm sorry?
The ones with jobs.
Jobs, what kind of jobs?
The job hidden.
Okay, the hidden job, that's right, you're correct. The hidden jobs first, hidden, and then what? I make another selection, but you're right, I missed that. Hidden first, then what? That match my candidates. Right, so I have my caseload here of all my candidates, and I match them by geography, and I match them by type of job. Why geography? They have to be able to get there, right? So what does this now give me that I've done that? I've matched my candidates by geography, I've matched my candidates by type of job. What does it now give me when I call the employer?
Ammunition.
Exactly. I know what I'm going to say. I know what I've got to offer. I'm not going to say any of it when I call, but I know I've got that. It's not like I just happen to find a job and then have to come back and look for somebody who might happen to be able to fill it. So it's a way more efficient use of your time. What's the biggest drawback of this strategy? Yeah, well, you've got to prospect, right? There's no choice. You have to prospect. You either look in the newspapers, you either get in your car and drive around, you either go and talk to your friends and ask them if they know anybody. You've got to prospect. So it's way more time efficient than any other strategy of prospecting. The biggest drawback, people don't like making the calls. That's the biggest drawback. So that's why we either hire people to make the calls. That becomes their job. They're a prospector. And then they quit when they quit. Or we get clients to make the calls, or we make them ourselves. But the return on these calls is enormous, whereas it's not enormous on any of the other strategies. Some of the other passive strategies that would have return is not too bad, but these ones, the return is significant. Keith?
Popular response now is check our website. Everything's on the website.
So what do?
Check the website.
Check the website, hang up. You don't waste any time on a no. Why not? Because it's a no. It's a waste of time. Right? Let it go. You don't chase look on the web. You can go look on their website, right? Or you get a no, or it said, like, why are you calling me? You get somebody angry. Just forget it. Let it go. You've got a big enough market out there, they're irrelevant to you. And you know if you put them back into the system a year from now, you get a completely different response. So any questions on this system? You're going to give it a whirl? Let's see how brave you are.
Does this treat like, say you've got a big, large corporation, but there's lots of different smaller locations, right? Do you treat each location, I mean, typically they probably do their own hiring for entry-level positions, so do you treat each of those as a separate business in a sense?
If they came up on my call list, right, and let's say I got, because I can't think of anything else, but let's say I got Walmart on my call list. I give them a call. Whatever they said, yes or no, I'd move from there. That's all. There's no, if I got Ford on my call list, right, I give them a call, and they'll say yes or no. They'll say, go talk to my HR manager. But in general, if I was talking to a corporation, I would use a corporate cell. I would not use this kind of cell, right? Because in a corporation, they're probably not going to advertise their positions. If they're advertising their positions, they're fairly selective, and we may not be able to see them. And once we do see them, they're already in the competitive milieu. So they're already on the website. It's already, millions of people are already applying. So I'm going to use a different strategy to get corporations on board than finding job openings that they have. So it's not, I'm not going to just go out and call them. I'm actually going to go with a completely different set of ideas. And if this is for you, if, yeah, if I went into a corporation and if I was from Workforce, right, you have the perfect excuse because Workforce is a powerful name in your communities and you have powerful reputation. I'd go into the HR director and I'd say, I'd like to see what you and Workforce can do together. That's where I would start. I would say nothing about jobs. Because now they will see you. And once you're sitting there, now you have to have a corporate sell, all right? Which means I have to start talking about the corporation. All right. Let me show you a corporate, this is very quick, so you won't learn it completely here, but let me show you a corporate cell. All right. And then I'll show you this cell. All right, in a corporate cell, they have no need of you. You have to recognize that. They can get anybody that they want. What they have to have from you is they have to have some kind of focus that is different so they see you as being able to supply more than just a candidate. That's what you want from them. That's what will give you your collaboration and your cooperation. So when you go into them, you're going to ask them this kind of question. All right, you're going to give a brief overview of Workforce. And I don't have time to teach you how to do a brief overview, but something pleasant and nice and kind of ambitious and visionary. Give that kind of brief overview of Workforce. And then you're going to ask them this question. You're going to say, you know, the first question I ever ask corporations is, especially HR directors, is what's keeping you awake at night? Right? What are you worrying about as an HR director in the employees you have in your company? And then I shut up. Right? What has that got to do with employment? Nothing until they say it. Right? If you're not sure what they're saying, you can give them some examples because you have Workforce examples. Well, other businesses your size are worried about, are they getting, I'm going to use the healthcare, which is the only one I remember, is getting nurses. Is getting nurses a concern to you? And the more they tell you what it is, here's your next question. So what are you worried about at night? Here's your next question. What happens if you don't solve this problem? Do you see what I'm doing? I ain't talking about my candidates. I'm not talking about Workforce. Who am I talking about? Them. At what level? What do managers think about? They don't think about how do I hire a nurse. Who thinks about that? HR, where? Where in HR? The recruitment person. You ain't talking to a recruitment person. You're talking to a director of HR. You're talking to a manager of HR. If you were even talking to the CEO, what do they think about? No, they don't. They already got lots of that. But you're right. It's like money, but that's not what they think about. Where is my business going and what's going to get in my way? That's what they're thinking about. They're future thinkers. They're not present thinkers. They need to put their vision onto the table. What problems do I foresee coming? And once you link to that vision, what problems do I foresee coming? They'll buy from you forever. Why? Because that's what they want solved. They're not interested in hiring 5 nurses, but we're going to get to them hiring 5 nurses once we have the other information from them, and we're going to get to them about how they join your committees and how they become part of Workforce for designing other types of programs once we have that information. Because what can we link to that information? How we can solve it. So the first question, what keeps you awake at night? Second question, what happens if you don't solve it right now? Right? Third question, what happens 2 years from now if this is still not solved? Now, why am I using that question? I want them to worry. Right? I want them to give me the possibility of building something bigger. I wanted to say, well, you know how your vision is 2 years from now? You will not be addressing this problem. And if you are addressing it, you're going to start losing market share. I just want to be able to say that. Why do I want to be able to say it? Because it hooks their mind. It brings them to the place that they will now look at my product from the perspective of their problem, not from the competencies of the product. And who are they going to trust? Why? Well, what did I do? Why would they trust me? Because they told me. The more people talk to you, the more information they give, the more they will buy from you. The more you talk to them, the more information you give, the less they will buy from you. So the rule of thumb is what? Keep your mouth shut. Have your questions and shut up. Especially at corporate. And anytime they say this, because they'll always say this, I always found this amazingly funny. I went into, they have workers' compensation here? So I go into the CEO of workers' compensation in Toronto. And I got a political favor to see him, right? Because it was I didn't know him. I didn't prospect him. But I had a friend who knew him, and she got me in. And I said, well, what's the challenge you're facing? And he said, well, we're doing pretty good. We got like a 95% rate on, people returning to work. And I'm listening to all this, and I'm going, wow, that sounds pretty good. That's terrific. That's wonderful. Wow, I don't know what we can do here. That sounds terrific. Anytime I got good information, I just congratulated them. And I said, that sounds terrific. And then I would say, I don't know what we can do here. Right? And then he said, I'm worried about the 5%. Unless they're allowed to brag first about how well everything is going, they won't tell you the dirty laundry. So you have to accept how well everything is going, right? And then say nothing more than, is there anything else? Something you're worried about? Because you seem to be doing so well, right? But nobody's doing so well. They're all doing well, but they all got problems. So I need to give them support on they're doing well, but what might the problems still be? And then those problems will emerge. But if I went in there and said, well, do you have problems with this or do you have problems with that? What would they say to me? No, I got a 25% success rate. They get defensive. They defend their position. I want them to acknowledge, I want them to realize I've acknowledged their position, that the position is valid, that they're valid, right? And see if there's anything else I can do for them. When Rosetti, close your ears. When I sold VR, because I sold lots of VR across the United States, my question always was this. I would say, wow, I don't think you need us here. You guys are doing so well in VR. Every time they'd say to me, well, yeah, we're doing okay, but I still think we need you. Only by acknowledging that they were okay would they then admit they weren't. So going in and trying to force a problem onto them, like how are you hiring nurses, or like are you getting the best nurses that you can get, will just cause defensiveness. They have to begin to tell you about themselves, brag about themselves, and then you can get them to start to sort out the problems that they have. All right, so that's a corporate sell. There's actually a few more steps in it, but that's how we would do a corporate sell. We would not use this one to identify them. We would just pick them because we wanted them or we had a friend who could introduce ourselves to them. If I was using this type, I found a job, I'm going to see a basic hiring manager, I would use a different type of strategy to get that person to tell me their problems. And I see if I've got that next. No, I don't. What time is it?
4:27.
4?
33 minutes.
Oh, I guess I better hurry up. All right, let me do the one for if I was doing a regular sell and I went in to see the employer, just so you have something to do, because you're going to have employer appointments you're going to go to. Here's the first question you have to ask. What's the question after you introduce yourself as being from workforce? And I'm going to tell you, you need to design how you introduce yourself somewhat carefully. And again, Rosani can help you with that. But what's your first question to the employer? And in the last session, the first question that people tended to say is, what are you looking for? As for a candidate for this job, what are you looking for? Okay? It's the wrong question. And for those of you who are in the last session, why is it the wrong question? I'm sorry?
They're going to focus on the skills.
They're going to go to the skills, right? They're going to go to competitive things that we don't want. They're describing what we call God at minimum wage. That's what they're going to describe to us. So, when we go into that first engagement with the employer, as I went into the one with the corporate was, tell me what's keeping you awake at night. We don't ask that question. The guy's going to look at us and say, what the hell are you talking about? Right? This is just a basic hiring. So what's the first question? It's not, what are you looking for? Who would be your best candidate? None of that. Drop all of that if you're using it now. This is the first question. Tell me about the job. What are the key tasks? What tasks does the person actually have to do? What tasks are the hardest? What tasks are the ones that are most difficult to train on? Tell me everything you can about this actual job. Why am I doing that? And here's the key. If I can get them to describe the job to me, they're no longer interested in what the candidate looks like. They're only interested in what? What the candidate can do. And it's what we call moving somebody from an objective, from a subjective perspective to an objective perspective. Subjective, they describe the candidate to me. I want somebody who has a high school diploma. I want somebody 2 years experience. I'm blah, 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 blah. I'm not interested in any of that. Objective, I want somebody who can lift 50 pounds. I want somebody who can work fast on this machine. I want somebody who can learn how to run this computer. That's what I'm interested in. All right? So that's the first place that I go. What is the task? Describe the task. Now, I give you another little tip. Make sure that lasts for about 2 or 3 minutes. It can't just be, well, I want somebody who can run the computer. Tell me more about that. You've got to get them to explain the job in greater detail. All right. I'm giving this a little out of order, so if I run into it later in the presentation, I'll just skip it. Here's the second question you have to ask, and I'll show you in a minute why. Of all the tasks, of all the things that we have talked about that are necessary for this job, what are the 2 most important ones? This is an absolute must question in anybody's repertoire who engages employers. Everything that you're describing in this job, of everything that you want, tell me the 2 must-haves. What it does is it establishes a bottom for you rather than a top. What you want from somebody in this job is a top, right? Then you try to reach up to meet it. But if we establish a bottom and then build on top of that bottom with other attributes of our candidates look like winners. If we take our candidate in and we drop down from the top, what does our candidate look like? A loser. So I need to set the expectations of the employer to receive our candidates from a positive perspective, and I do that really with just one question. What are the 2 must-haves that you start with that no candidate could ever not have to be in this job? What are they? Then what do I do with that to my candidates? What do I ask my candidates? Yeah, show me you can do this. Why? Because if they can't, will I present that candidate? No, they won't work out. But if they can, it doesn't matter how they show it to me. It doesn't matter how they explain it to me. I can see the value in that candidate. And now I'm a believer because I know what I have to believe in. It's no more, how do I get them to think you've got a GED when you don't? That's no more on the table. I don't have to even think like that. I now have the concrete information that has convinced me that this candidate can do the job. I merely now have to convey it to the employer. All right? So there's a lot more questions we use in the needs analysis, but it's going to take me back here to these 4 steps, and then I'm going to maybe repeat it again. I won't repeat it. I'll just skip it as we move on. All right. Here was the key problem that we had in this business, and it's still a key problem I see in this business everywhere. And that is, almost all of the business when I started, and a lot of it is now, was based on what is called transactional selling. And transactional selling is the belief that the product sells itself. All right? So when you buy a car, it's almost always transactional selling. When you buy a refrigerator, it's almost transactional selling. What do they tell you about the car or the refrigerator to get you to buy it? What it can do for you. Right? So that you would come to believe, by seeing that, what it can do for you, that this is a good decision for you. That's called transactional selling. Well, we had a problem with that with our candidates with employment barriers because it was like we had a broken refrigerator. So we would go out there and highlight the attributes of our candidates, which were strong, but when the employer would see them, they'd say, no, well, that person's got that person's got a something. And they would then say, I don't believe those attributes. So we had to switch the strategy, and we switched it to what is called consultative selling. This is something, if you're going to engage partners or business in kind of collaboration with you, this is the strategy you need to use. There's one more sophisticated than this in what's called relationship selling. There are 2 types of relationship selling. One is this is a simpler one. One is consultative selling, then one's called collaborative selling, which is a way more sophisticated level of selling. But this one is the simplest. It's very easy to use, and it will revolutionize your business, and it will revolutionize your relationship with partners. All right, so the first thing is a 4-step model, And these 4 steps each have an objective, which means I know whether it's been accomplished or not. And I've put up the objectives up there. So prospecting is the first step, finding an employer with a job and getting an appointment. So if you cannot find, if somebody comes back to me and says, oh, there's nobody hiring in our community. It's like terrible. There's nobody hiring out there. What does it tell me? Their prospecting stinks. They haven't been able to find anything. There is never a time when nobody's hiring. Doesn't exist. The only difference would be they are in the hidden market and there's no public market. But people are always leaving their jobs. So jobs in transition. Have you ever heard that term? You must have heard of it in workforce, jobs in transition. 5% of the market of jobs in your community. The only time nobody would be hired in your community is if there were no jobs there. 5% of the market in your community is moving on to other jobs. They're leaving their job they have now, going someplace else. There's always a job opening there. This means the person has not been able to find somebody who's hiring, has not been able to get an appointment. They are still in prospecting, which means you have to strengthen your prospecting strategies. Number 2, I've got an employer who's hiring. They've agreed to see me. Now remember, this eliminates cold calls because they've agreed to see me. I now know who I'm going to talk about because I'm not going to talk about them, but I now know who I've got in mind. I'm going to now go in and do the needs analysis. In prospecting, there is no selling. In needs analysis, there is no selling. Why? Why is there no needs analysis? I'm going to find out about the job. Why is there no selling there? I'm sorry?
You're listening.
Because I'm listening, and I don't know who to sell to them. I haven't gone back to the candidate and said, here's the job, can you do it? Right? The candidate could say, no, I don't like that job. I did it before, and I hated it. I don't know. There is no selling in needs analysis. There is a belief in your organization in needs analysis, but they will believe it merely by the fact that they let you in. All I do in needs analysis is understand what they want in this job and then get them to agree, which is the objective, that they will entertain me presenting a candidate. So now they have agreed to be what? They've agreed to be sold. So when I go back to present my candidate, they've already decided they want to work with me. They're just not sure that this is the right candidate. They're going to sort. But I'm not going back with any doubts. I'm not going back with them presenting anything as resistance. I'm going back with them actually wanting to work with me. Why? Because they don't want to go down the path of looking at those resumes, of putting all that extra work onto the table. How many, I have to tell you my favorite hiring example when I was a manager. I had to hire more job developers. It was always a pain in the ass for me because there was, you know, like a dozen resumes you had to go through. I'd get into a cab and I'd say to the cab driver, you know anybody looking for a job? Why? Hoping they would say yes, because I say, well, send them in to see me, right? Well, what the hell did the cab driver know? I don't know, but I didn't have any other place to go, and it was much easier than going through the whole interview process. Most employers don't like hiring. Eventually, you hate it because it's too much work with not as much return as it has. It's kind of fun in the beginning, but eventually it's a lot of work. So they like to get rid of that job. So if they can think that they can get rid of it to you and be safe with that, there's a very good chance they're going to get rid of it. All right. Number 3, selling. Sure.
When you're just doing needs analysis, you go into your meeting with them, you're introducing yourself. How do you introduce yourself without speaking about like who you service?
Okay, so we have several techniques. I'll just give you one. So let's say I'll give you yours because you have felons and non-felons. All right? So we would say something like this. Our organization works with a wide range of people, a complete continuum of individuals who are looking for work. We have people who have been in trouble with the law, and we have people who have not been in trouble with the law. But there is a common denominator amongst all the candidates that I represent. Every one of them has been vetted, and every one of them is motivated, reliable, and dependable, wanting to go to work, and pull themselves up from their bootstraps. Right? Completely different image now, right? Let me give you one for this. People only worked with felons. This was one of my favorite. It was called Wildcat in New York City. They said this, and they worked with people, mostly drug offenders. So they'd go into the employer and they'd say, hi, we're Wildcat. You know we work with drug offenders, right? And that's all we work with. But I want to tell you, everybody who's in our program has been in there for 18 months voluntarily. So they're people who have decided to turn their lives around. These are people who want to make a difference in their communities now and not be back onto the offending. Okay? If you were worried about hiring drug offenders, the ones you should be worried about are not in my program. right? It's a clever spin to make them look, and they believe it, right? It's not false. It's not like it's a lie, but they believe it, that these are good people. And now I have my doubts assuaged. I may not be completely convinced, but I'm not now negative. I'm at least a neutral. So what we do is we position the wealth of our population, and if we've got a mixed population, it's very easy to do. In fact, if I was in your case, I would never even mention there was any felons involved at all. I would just say we work with a group of people who come from very varied backgrounds, and one of the things they have in common is their desire to go to work and their commitment to being prepared to go to work. And what I'd like to do is take a look at this job, and then from that group of people, select somebody I think is going to be the best candidate for you. See what I'm not doing? I'm not trying to get rid of the barrier. I'm not apologizing for it. I'm not trying to outweigh it with glitter. All I'm saying is I'm interested in finding a good candidate for you. And once I get them on board, that they've told me what they're looking for and the skills that they have, they don't care about what my candidate looks like anymore. All they care about is what? Are you convinced, Alan, that they can actually do this job? Because they are transferring the hire to me. That's what they're doing. Now, they'll go through the same process. So as an example, we never have our candidates, well, I shouldn't say never. Most times we don't. Have our candidates go through an interview. We never let the employer interview them. Yeah, good. I'm glad somebody did that. Right? And you say, why? Because they're crappy at interviews. So all this work that I've done, and then I put this person in front of the employer to make the decision based on an interview which my candidate I know is not going to do well, I'm not putting them there. It's going to be hard on the candidate when they fail. They're not going to get any better. They're trying their best, but they're not great at interviews. The employer's going to walk out thinking that we gave them somebody bad. So when we present our candidate, we use what's called a selling statement. And it's structured on a particular piece of information. But I present my candidate, and then at the end of that, the employer says, I want to interview them. And I say, nope, you don't. Why? Because I've earned the right to talk frankly to this employer. I've got all this information. No, you don't. My candidate interviews like stink. They're a terrible interviewer, right? But they're a great worker. What I'd like you to do is a meet and greet. You meet them, you see that you like them, and you put them into the probationary period like anybody else, and you test them on the job. That's what they do. We don't use resumes. We don't use interviews. Now, somebody may say to us, no, mandated by corporation, corporate headquarters, we have to have a resume, we have to have an application. We will prepare all that, but we don't let it be the decision maker in the employer. Now, for those of your population who can do that, we don't say don't do it. But for those of them who can't, we say it's best to have abandoned it, to use a completely different type of strategy. So what piece of paper do we offer the employer? It's a little later in here. We offer them what's called an employer profile, candidate profile. And what a candidate profile is why did I pick this candidate for this job? What is it about this particular candidate? What do they have at this moment in time that makes me believe they can actually do this job? So I don't do their history. And why did we do that? Because so many of our candidates had nothing you could put on their resumes. It was like terrible. And anybody who looked at it from a resume perspective would say this is awful. But if I could put on as simple a thing as this, I know this candidate is motivated, reliable, and dependable. Here's how I know they're motivated. They cut the grass of their neighbor for the last 2 years because that person was in hospital. That's how I know they're motivated. When I say something like that, the employer sees it differently. Could I put that on a resume? Difficult, right? Dependable. I had a woman who was a refugee. She was deaf and had a bad arm. I was in Nebraska. And she was 45 years old, had come out of the refugee camps of, I think, anyway, Burma or someplace there. And she had been there for 25 years in the refugee camps before you brought her to this country as a refugee. She left behind 3 children. They were the children of her sister, who had abandoned them when they were babies. And she had raised them. It was her sister's children, and she came out. Every month, she sent money back to those children. And these people were saying, what can I say about this woman so that people will hire her? I'm looking at them going, Jesus, just tell that story. Who would not hire somebody who took care of 3 children who were not their own in a refugee camp and then came here, made something of their life so they make some money, and now are sending that money back to their own family in this refugee camp to help them out? Who would not see that as a valuable employee? Somebody who would be committed and dedicated to going to work, right? Could it occur on a resume? Difficult. It might be able to, but difficult. And that's what we found with a lot of our candidates. They were valuable people, but you couldn't put it into a resume format, so we dumped it. And same with the interview. They couldn't talk about themselves like that, so we dumped it. And we began to take the responsibility as the agency, and then as the staff of the agency, to make that case and sell them ourselves, rather than them selling themselves, and then the employer bought us, not the candidate, and just accepted the candidate. How am I doing for time?
Yeah, 15 minutes.
Okay, good. Any questions? And I'll move on.
On that scenario, what percentage roughly of those candidates the employer said, no, they don't pass the probation?
For us, we expect refugees, not much because they're highly motivated. We don't get much on refugees. Developmental disability, mental health, we expect to place them 5 times. Right? So we don't worry about they don't make their first job. We worry about, did we learn anything on the first job to help them be better on the second job? That's what we worry about. So we have no issue around people losing their jobs. I know that's a metric a lot of people use, but for us, it's irrelevant. Even if I had to place them 7 times, as long as I saw a gradation of growth every time they had a job and every time they lost. So an example, we placed a person with a mental health issue, anxiety, super worker. Employer gives them more responsibility. What did the person do? They ran. Right? They could manage their anxiety at a certain level. They couldn't manage it at this level. We didn't know that. What's our next job for them? At this level. It's where we're going to put you. We'll get you another job. Which means we need to own the market. We can't be, oh my God, that's the only job we can find for this person. Because if we're at that place, oh my God, it's the only job we can find this person, then you put pressure on the person to be what they want in that job so that you can keep the stat. And we go, we don't want that. We want them in a job where they see themselves as valuable, the employer sees themselves as valuable, and we're doing as minimum support as possible because it's running all by itself. So yeah, we expect we will have a lot of people fail, but that's only because it's their first job. And a lot of the populations we work with had no first job history. They didn't do jobs in high school. They didn't do things with their family. This is their first time in the community. And I have to tell you, the other thing is, their choices for their first time in the community are often wrong. They hate the job they picked because they didn't know enough about it. And so we say, that's fine. Pick another one that you wanted. We'll try another one because we got lots of them. Tim?
So as you communicate that to the next person that hired them, don't give them more responsibility?
Yeah. We picked a job that had less responsibility that matched their needs. We didn't even have to say that, but we would watch it. And we'd say, listen, this person works at this level. It's probably better that they stay at this level. But we also know that the person grows. So if at some point they want to decide to take something better, the employer offers them, they take it, we would have already worked on them around the anxiety. We'd say, if you don't like it and you need to leave, come back and see us. We'll get you another job. We had, when we used this system, and I'll tell you, in this economy, it's golden, we had no problem getting jobs. None. We had thousands of them. So we could take in candidates who we knew nothing about and just say, you want a job? And they'd say, yep. We'd put them out in the job and use the job to define where they were going to go. Right? So we moved completely away from this preparation focus. We use it because it's beneficial to the candidate to prepare because they grow. They get skills. They get things. But we didn't use it because that was the strategy that got them jobs. The strategy that got them jobs was us being able to engage the employer in a way that allowed the employer to take people they would not typically have taken. So the third one is the selling. How do you actually make the sell? I'm going to show you how to make a sell, and then I'm going to stop. There's a bunch of other stuff I have in here, but I'll be out of time. I'm going to sell you a credit card. If you have seen me, do I have it here? No. Okay. If you've seen me do this before, if you've seen Rosanne do it before, then don't shout out the answers, okay? Now, there was a time when a golden credit card was the best, but now it's black. So maybe it'll change in the future. And if you know what I'm doing, because this is not an unknown strategy, it's just that we adapted it. If you know what I'm doing, don't shout out the answer until I say, shout out the answer, and then you can tell everybody. Okay? So I want you to tell me anything you want about this credit card. Let's just start with the fact that it's black. Anything else?
Small. Has your name.
Has a name. All right? And it's convenient. And it's safe. And it's multifunctional. What else?
Branded?
It's branded. So it's got whatever bank. So I can just put bank. What else? It's rectangular. I can't spell rectangular.
Light.
It's light. Fits in your wallet. Yep. So it offers a certain amount of freedom. Use anywhere. Gives you some status. People think you've got more money than you do. Certain amount of prestige. No, I can't spell prestige either. Okay? And it's plastic. All right. I'm going to sell you the credit card. Are you ready? I'm going to sell you this credit card because it's, just tell me if you want it when I start on this one side. I'm going to sell you this credit card because it's black. It's got a name on it. It belongs to a bank. It's rectangular. It fits in your wallet. And it's plastic. Who's interested in this credit card? Come on, I'll give it a little more enthusiasm. It's black. Right? It's got a rectangular shape. Who's interested? No, okay. Let's go to this other side. I'm going to sell you this credit card because it's going to give you a lot of convenience. I'm going to sell you this credit card because you're going to be safe with your money and you're going to be safe when you travel. I'm going to sell you this credit card because it's multifunctional. Not only can you use it for cash, you can use it to pay off your debts, you can gain a little bit of time ahead of your creditors. I'm going to sell you this credit card because it's going to give you a lot of freedom. You can buy things you could not buy with cash when you buy with this credit card. I'm going to sell you this credit card because you can use it anywhere. Go anywhere in the world, one little credit card, and you're fine. Get some status because it's black. People, again, think you have more money than you do. And the last one, I'm going to sell you because it gives you prestige. When you go out there, you buy the meal, you can go, oh boy, this person's pretty hot because they got all this money, they got this black credit card. Who's interested on this side? Feels better over here, right? Why? This is now when you can shout it out if you know what I'm doing.
Emotional connection. It's about you, it's not about the card.
It's about you, it's not about the card. So in selling, there's a technique called features and benefits. And this is a common business sales strategy. And it's one we adapted. And I'll show you why we adapted it. Bad business benefits. All right? And we adapted it because features are characteristics of the product. They describe the product. That's what they are. Benefits are gains or advantages you get from the product. All right? People never buy features. They only buy benefits. Why is that significant? Because let me show you how people describe our candidates. They've got grade 12 or high school diploma. They've got 2 years experience. They're a hard worker. They're motivated. What are these? Features. Who buys them? Nobody. So the basic sell that we're using for our candidates is wrong. And it's only recognized by somebody who in their mind has already made a link between this feature and a potential benefit for them, but you don't know what it is. 7 minutes left. You don't know what that link is. So this particular strategy, we use a triangle to describe it. So needs, features, benefits. When you talk about to the employer about these two things, right? These belong to the employer. What their needs are and what they get if those needs are satisfied, their benefits. You then connect it to a feature. Does the employer believe you? Yes, because you told me why you want that benefit, why you want that feature. You want it to deliver this benefit. Do you know if it will deliver that benefit? Only probability, because nobody knows. Let me give you a quick example if you don't know. What do young men, now older men are doing the same thing, Why do young men buy hot red convertibles? For the attention from who? From hot girls. It's not for attention from their mother or their aunts, right? Or girls they don't care about. That's not who it's for the girls they care about. Why? Why do they think that? Because they've been taught that there is a connection, a benefit connected to a hot car will allow you to pick up a hot girl. All right? In their mind, that connection exists. Does it exist? No, it's stupid. It doesn't exist. But in their mind, it exists. So as long as it exists in their mind, it is real, which means the hot car will generate that benefit. If I could convince a person that if you wore a funny hat, you would pick up hot girls, what would they buy? A funny hat. That's what I'm doing here. I am convincing an employer that by understanding their needs and their benefits, that this feature will work for them. And when I do that, what is the relevance of the barrier in this feature? Because do I explain what the barrier is? Why do I not explain what the barrier is? Why do I not explain that they're a felon, except under law I have to? Why do I not explain that they're a felon, or they've got a disability, or that they've got, they're elder, or they're a senior, or whatever? Why do I not explain it when I'm trying to sell the person? Because it's irrelevant. Thank you. In this system of selling, what's relevant? The features that they have that meet the needs that give you the potential of this benefit. And we do that through what's called a selling statement. And I'll give you an example. I got one here and then I'm going to stop. Okay. Example selling statement. This is from a person who wants to hire a cashier for their store. So we went out to them, we asked them their needs, and now we're going to sell to them. And all we do is repeat back the information they gave us. We don't make anything up, except on the features. So we say, you said you wanted someone who could open the store early and who would properly engage your customers. Those are the two primary needs you had to have fulfilled in this job. Benefits. You said, remember it says you said, and I asked them for them. What are the benefits of these two things? If they're fulfilled, what are the benefits you get? You said you wanted this so that you did not have to worry about opening the store yourself, and you had more time for fishing, and were comfortable the person would be there all day helping your customers. Who gave me that information? The employer did. I didn't make it up. All I do is repeat it back to them. And all right, here's the features. Let me start by telling you why I picked Alan, that was me, as a good choice for you. Right? Now I'm just mentioning the candidate. I will run through his assets, then you can ask me questions on anything else you want to know about him, and we can make a decision from there. Is that okay? As soon as they say yes, what have they done? They've agreed to engage with a high likelihood of hiring. So at the end of that, I present Alan with my candidate profile, which just lists, here's the needs that you have, here are the benefits you wanted, and here are the assets that Alan has. I just put them on a piece of paper, and I hand that to them, and I walk it through it. They read it as I walk through it. At the end, I say, what do you think? Do you have any questions? Thank you. Do you have any questions? And they say yes or no. And if they say yes, I say, what are the questions? And we keep talking. If they say no, I said, okay, so let's go ahead with the decision. Do you think Alan's the right person for you? And they will say yes or no, or maybe. If they say yes, I said, all right, next steps. I don't think you should interview him. He's a terrible interviewer, but he's a great worker. And now I avoid the interview. Do you see what I'm doing here? I am in control of this conversation. But in control from what perspective? The employer's perspective. What relevance does the candidate have here? What relevance does their barrier have here? None. It doesn't matter who they are or what the barrier, as long as they trust me that I have vetted them enough that that candidate will work out. This system is extremely successful. This is also a system you can use in all the other stuff where you're engaging partners. The same thing. Here's what you said you wanted. Here are the benefits you get from a partnership. Let me describe my program to you and why it will deliver that to you. Now they're working to work with you. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed being here and having the opportunity to present to you.